welcome to the How to Deal with Everyday Threats and Thrive Online panel. Before we jump in, I want to take this opportunity to thank the Dreamhack, High-Res, and Skillshot teams for inviting the nonprofit Savvy Cyber Kids to lead this important discussion that affects all of us. Next up, our esteemed panelists. I'm excited to welcome Riddle, Reinessa, Zyrus, and James, whom will be providing a first-hand look into some of the threats we face in gaming, cosplay, and esports industries, and how we can overcome them to be our best selves. So now for official introductions, I will read you the bios of our esteemed panelists. So Riddle.
You can short mine if it's a really long.
Well, I'm not leaving out the squirrels. So Dreamhack head cosplay judge. Ricky Riddle is a Canadian cosplayer, model, and costume designer based in Atlanta. She is internationally recognized as one of the top cosplayers and has extensive crafting experience as demonstrated by her awards earned on Heroes of Cosplay and features in various cosplay outlets. In addition to her own cosplay work, Riddle has also specializes in handling specialty costume on sets of films including Captain America Civil War, Avengers Endgame, and Godzilla. And how do we get to join you on set? Okay.
Gosh, bring me squirrel.
Okay, fine.
I'll get you a set to her.
Done. In her free time, she helps with the rehabilitation of squirrels and encourages everyone to respect their natural habitats.
I do.
So welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. All right, Reinessa. Reinessa has been a Twitch streamer for over 6 years and a Twitch partner for 4. As a cosplayer, she competed at the International and at TwitchCon. In addition, she is a cosplay judge and cosplay coordinator for Dreamhack. She works full-time as the chief content coordinator for an esports website creating Dota 2 content. Reinessa travels to events as a live host and interviewer for esports. From a formal education perspective, she earned a master's degree in biochem. All right. Zyrus has been involved in the video game and esports world for around 8 years. He currently works for a platform called ESEA that is directly involved in Counter-Strike Global Offensive that provides players in the game a place to play as a community and provides direct path to become a professional through league divisions. His focus is conduct support, where it is his responsibility to He's a devout gamer, having played competitively in multiple titles, including Clash of Clans, Hearthstone, League of Legends, and Auto Chess since 2011. His personal mission is to represent his home city of Atlanta by being a positive influence, citizen, and champion for professional esports conduct. So thank you all for being here. Last year, Pew Research Center released a study of 13 to 17-year-olds and found that almost every single teen plays video games. Shocking. If you're here, you already knew that. 97% of boys and 83% of girls said they are playing video games. I believe those numbers are probably closer to 100% and 100%. Just me, kind of a guess. Everyone kind of has games on their...
If you have a cell phone, you play video games.
Of course you do.
Also, if you ever had Facebook.
Yeah.
Because there's a million games on Facebook.
And now you have games in Snapchat and other things too, right? Yeah, so.
There's even an Instagram filter right now where you blink your eyes and someone has to bounce and it flies, and every time you blink, they flap their wings. And you have to get them through obstacles.
Do you count those personality tests you take on Facebook as a game?
We call those data vacuums.
Well, I am Belle, okay? No.
So in the same survey, it said that 45% of teens now say they're online on an almost near constant basis. And well, yes, we see that too. These mobile devices that we all carry around and the teens carry around, they've only been in our lives for about 12 years. But it seems like they've been around forever and we've never lived without them. So pretty interesting. But today's teens and younger children are exposed to a myriad of threats when they go online. From a broad category perspective, we're talking about cyberbullying, hate and terrorist group recruitment, poor, harassing, toxic, and aggressive behavior, scams, sexual predators, sextortion, swatting, viruses and other malicious code, inappropriate inappropriate content, fraudulent in-game goods for purchase, privacy invasion, gaming addiction, and identity theft. I mean, that's quite the list, isn't it? Unfortunately, these threats manifest themselves when these threats manifest themselves in someone's life, their life is negatively impacted, both from a mental and a physical state, and sometimes it could be life-ending. So I have a few examples that I'm going to read to y'all before we jump into the panel. So here's the first one. Two gamers, 25 and 28 years old, were playing Call of Duty World War II, and they got into a dispute. One dared the other to swat him, and he did. He called the police with a false report, and the police responded to the target's home. When the man walked out the door to see why there were so many police officers outside, the police shot and murdered him.
And I've had it happen a few times where someone who is a loyal member of my community becomes very, very insistent on my time and tries to start telling me what to do and force their opinion on me. And it got really out of hand with one particular person in my community that made me very, very uncomfortable. And I'm very private about my information, so I wasn't too concerned about my own security, but I didn't sleep for 2 months, just about, while this was happening. And the internet, it's so easy for someone to harass you because you can't just block them. They can keep making new accounts. And when you're a public figure that is present across multiple platforms, this can continually come up. And even when I thought the issue was dead, 2 years later, this person was back. And it's always something I have to be afraid of, is will they be back? And a note I want to add that as a woman, we're actually conditioned to always be nice because we're usually smaller and weaker, and you don't know what the other person's going to do. And when women are assertive, you're usually called mean. When men are assertive, it's and I've read a lot of studies on this, biochemistry background, I've looked into this. And so there's this nature that when you're a woman on the internet, you're just supposed to be nice because people expect that. And because it's a text interaction, you really have to be nice to get your tone across. And so if someone is harassing you, your first instinct is to be nice and try and de-escalate. And I found that all that does is encourage because they just see the nice and they don't see the de-escalation.
Yeah, so to that point, I was reading Nikki Haley's new book that came out, and I don't know if you remember this or not, but President Trump actually tweeted something that Nikki Haley didn't like, and she tweeted back, "Bless your heart." So her taking a little stronger tone, right, over social media. Okay, so thank you for sharing.
And the other note I'd like to say is I was very vague with that story.
Yeah.
Because I just shared the link of the stream.
Yeah.
And I still don't want that person to know I'm talking about it.
Right.
That's still something that's affecting me right now.
Mm-hmm.
So.
It's terrible. Yeah. We're speaking up. And if it's happening to you, it's happening to others as well. And we actually know that it's happening to others, right?
So I have a few stories, but I'll just try to dive into something that's most personal to me. So having been part of the competitive esports scene, I would say that the mental health care side of it is really important, and you don't necessarily see what is going on behind the scenes in somebody's mind. Like if you're comparing it to something like the NFL, for instance, with concussions and injuries, it's very visible, or at least it's more visible, because over time the players, they get injured, they're unable to play, they're unable to perform as well as they would. But with professional players, mental health care isn't readily accessible to them, it's not available. And so when you're constantly seeing somebody either being harassed or they're being portrayed as somebody that's either mean or not to what they personally hold dear to them, it weighs heavily on them. Mm-hmm. And then if they don't have the resources available to support that, it can lead to people taking actions on that. So I've had multiple friends who have received death threats. They've stated that they're not worth anything, they don't hold any value in this world. And if you hear enough people say that, the wrong day, the wrong time, somebody will begin to believe that too.
Yeah, we have also seen, unfortunately, where I believe this case is in New York, where a girlfriend actually encouraged her then boyfriend at the time to kill himself over text message, and she was convicted. So yeah, we have to be very careful the kind of messages that we direct towards other people, and people we know and people we don't necessarily know.
And outside of this, working in the cybersecurity industry, I would always recommend, if you're a content creator, if you're a streamer, if you're just somebody that's concerned about someone taking aggressive action toward you, I would highly recommend reaching out to law enforcement. There are people that are specifically trained to work in these types of fields, and they can assist you in helping you make your life a little bit easier.
Yeah, and you know, probably just as short as 5 years ago or so, the law enforcement community was not really equipped to deal with that, but now they are because it's happening so often.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
So over the years, like playing video games, I've definitely dealt with a plethora of insults and threats. Nothing like too crazy, but I did have one personal experience where the platform that I worked on, a player from the platform was banned and taken off the network, and they specifically sent out a death threat towards me. They told me they were going to murder me in the streets of New York. I was visiting New York for an event, and I was pretty shocked at first. Didn't really know, how to deal with it or handle it. So I did like what I think anybody would do, and I called my local police department and talked to them about it. And they just told me there really isn't anything they can do. The internet is so anonymous, and they don't have the capabilities to really do anything about it. So it's definitely sad to see, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, so I've been cosplaying for 20 years. So I've definitely been in the community far before.
So you were born into cosplay?
Pretty much just jumped out of the womb, like ninja Naruto style. So it's interesting. I have really seen the rise of cosplay used for social media. Like I remember LiveJournal, MySpace, Angel Cities, GeoCities, all that jazz.
GeoCities, wow.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many, and I mean, I've played video games since I was a kid, but I never really got into the online aspect that much. So most of my issues have come from cosplay, and a lot of people don't like to talk about it because they like to paint cosplay, and it's like it's a magical thing, and it's all about love and community, but it's not. Like with anything, it's got its dark corners. And as they were telling stories, I was like, oh yeah, and then I don't have any stories. And I'm like, oh yeah, and this, and this, and this. Early on, I'm sure you guys know the website 4chan. Sort of before Facebook or anything else, there was a whole section just dedicated, just ripping apart cosplayers or telling rumors about them. Like, I think at one point, I did a charity calendar. And it was sort of the first cosplay charity calendar, and I was really promoting it. I got cosplayers from all over the world, and you don't think you have to describe like the process of a charity calendar, but on 4chan they proceeded to like say I stole the money, got a nose job. Trust me, if I was stealing money, this is not the nose I would pay for. But they would just try to like constantly discredit you, or for some reason there was like stigma if you made your costume, if you didn't make your costume, and then it just started this like really dark rumor pool, and then you'd be at a con and you'd see people like whispering. So that was like the bane of my existence, like early on. But recently there was she was talking about there is an entitlement issue where your community, some people do feel entitled to your time, and you want to be nice because you understand all of us are a little socially awkward, and sometimes it doesn't come from a bad place, so I don't want to like come at them, but it did get to the point where this guy was sending, sorry this is going on really long, I apologize. He was sending me, I usually don't, I don't like people sending me gifts because that is the first step to them feeling like you owe them. Even, so this guy was sending me DVDs, and within them, there was religious text. Like it would be like, you know, here's the Bourne Ultimatum DVD and Jesus, blah, 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 blah. And I am an atheist. And so after the 4th package, I politely said to him, hey, I really appreciate it, but these are my beliefs, and I respect your beliefs, but it's just, if you're trying to convert me, it's just not gonna happen. And he's like, well, I just wanna say, if something happens to you, I just wanna make sure you go to heaven with me.
Mhm.
And when you read that, it was a little scary, and then I was going to a convention, and he was gonna be there, and like, it just mimics everything she was saying. He just couldn't get the hint. And eventually I had to put my foot down, and then he started like chiming in other conversations on Twitter that I was having with other people saying like mean things about me. And yeah, it's just really, it's like you try to be a nice person, and unless, maybe as a woman, you stand up for yourself, you're suddenly a bitch. Like,
Well, we all need to stand up for
well,
ourselves.
yeah, but then what happens is then you're afraid there's going to be a retaliation. Like, oh, she's mean to me, well, I don't like her anymore, so now I'm going to do something to hurt her.
Mhm.
Because if you think that, you know, they're, in my mind, as long as they, I mean, I listen to a lot of true crime, so I know this is not the case, but in my mind, you're like, oh, if they appreciate you and like you, they're not going to physically hurt you. But the moment you piss them off, there could be some rage, anger, revenge actions against you. So that's, I know for me, that's really scary. Anyways, yeah, that's me.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
For sharing that. So I had an experience not too long ago where someone made a derogatory comment on one of our nonprofit's Instagram posts, and then it was followed up a few minutes later by an email to the email listed on our website saying that something to the effect of that I was an idiot and this person was going to kill me. And so I spent about 5 minutes tracking this person down and determined that this person is a very young individual. I would say this individual was probably somewhere between 10 to 12 years old and was sending this and thought this was okay. So figured out a lot about this person's life, and I sent an email to one of his coaches to let him know about this, and I offered the opportunity if the coach was interested on doing sessions for the teams on how to actually be nice online and thrive online and use social media and technology for good. So it happens, and but that kind of leads me into the next question, which is based on what we do in gaming, in cosplay, streaming, just being online in general. How have you used different forms of anonymity to help shield yourself and protect yourself from some of the nefarious people that are out there that might look to do harm?
So for a long time I was very private about my name. It recently was released, I signed off on it, but it was for professional reasons, and I decided I'm finally at a point where this was okay. But while I was in school, schools have rosters of active students that share more information than I was comfortable with. So when I got to grad school, I had a very long fight with the administration to take down my picture, to take down my name, or to at least change it so it was no longer my full name, and they didn't understand. And they fought me on it, and they just marked me as a problem child. And I said, I did not give you the right to display my information. Remove it now. And so that's one step. Another one is that I actually registered Reinessa as a business, which means that on all tax information, on PayPal, on everything, the only information I have to give them is my tax ID and Reinessa, which means that I can still work in this industry and get paid and do what I want to do without having to give out all of my personal information. And that was a really wonderful thing to learn. I also have an accountant because I did that, and it makes your taxes really complicated, but it's worth it. And then there's also services, and I wish I had looked it up before I stepped on here, but I pay a service to regularly search the internet for my information and scrub it. So if my info pops up anywhere, those websites are not legally allowed to leave it there if you request a takedown, but their takedowns are very complicated.
Yes,
So I pay a monthly subscription fee, and I get emails letting me know when things have popped up and then when they're gone, and they go through all of that for me.
which is great. And there are multiple services out there that do that. And I've done some of them manually myself too for privacy reasons, but the interesting thing is you really actually need a service to do that because people have access to public databases that really does have all the information about all of us, including what hackers have actually exfiltrated from breaches and things like that, from like Equifax and credit card companies and such. So they have a lot of information about us, so having a service is a great idea.
And I don't tell people my name. I always introduce myself as Reinessa. It sounds like a real name, so if you're picking a gamer tag, pick one that sounds like a name if you're concerned, because no one will ask for your real name when you do that. That's been really helpful.
It's a great tip.
Yeah, and when people ask where I live, I say the Eastern time zone.
Nice.
And why do you need to know anything else? That's how I just say why. And then they get kind of shy, they're, why not? I say, why? It's great. They get very uncomfortable. It's wonderful. It's very useful.
Good. Great. Thanks.
Can you restate the question again?
So how do you use anonymity in some of what you do
Yes.
so that you can do what you want to do and have fun? Be safe.
So I'm going to be a little bit counter to this, but
Sure.
also working in the cybersecurity industry, I'm familiar with some of the same services, being able to scrub information, using VPNs and things to kind of hide your location and make sure that you're protecting yourself personally. I use my name everywhere that I go. I try to be as public as possible with who I am, what my beliefs are, what my personal mission is, and what I want to do to help serve others. So having that experience, it does present a lot of risks to it, but from my personal belief, I want to ensure that people are seeing me as being genuine, who I am at all times, and I have accepted that as potential for things that are bad happening. Be that what it may, I do definitely recommend that people who are public figures take steps to protect themselves at all times. Obviously, you can use the information scrubbing, make sure that if you are popular, if there are people that are interested in either stalking you, finding you in some way, or maybe a threat to you, you should take adequate steps to protect yourself.
Yeah, so as adults, we have the opportunity to make that decision. We can be as anonymous as we want, or we can be as public as we want. So I'm as public as I want as well, because I'm actually kind of doing something along the lines of what you're doing and trying to share a message. And one thing that we need to think about is the kids that are getting on to these games and these platforms and getting into cosplay and things like that. And we need to be teaching them that, you know what? You should probably not be using your real name as a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old going out there because of your age, you're specifically a target. So it's important that, I think industry helps kids that are kind of getting into all aspects on how to be safe. So parents have a lot to agree.
Yeah, that's why the duality of it is,
Yes.
is so tricky, because if you want to be a positive role model for the youth as they're going into gaming culture, but you also want them to not completely exhibit what you're doing, you have to make sure that you're clear
It's a balance.
on what you're communicating.
And as adults, we can actually handle that balance because we have fully developed brains and we can, reason and make decisions.
Mine's just fully developed, like it's brand new.
Wow, thanks for rubbing that in, by the way. Some of us are way older than that. But for kids, that have problems doing that, reasoning and decision making, parents need to help, adults need to help them.
Anyway, yeah.
So, I'm kind of counter to it as well. My name being Zyrus, online, I had an alias, but, it only took that one time for someone to hear my name. Not many people have, my name in general, and I was doxxed at a very young age, and I had all my personal information released, and I just pretty much talked to my parents about it, and we set up like an alarm, cameras, etc., to try to prevent people from coming to my house, or if we were to be swatted, that was definitely in the back of my mind for sure. I did the same thing as you. I registered in a company so I could try to have my information as best as possible. I definitely think it's important to have anonymity online for sure. It's definitely important because you don't want people knowing your information. And
yeah. And we talk about it up here kind of casually about the experiences we've had, but I can imagine that all of these experiences were completely nerve-wracking. You mentioned lasting years and continues, right? So
Ongoing.
yeah, ongoing. So yeah, very mentally taxing, which can also be physically taxing.
At some point, you just have to live with it, and you just have to be confident and take it head on, pretty much.
One piece I did want to add real quick was, from a social media perspective, being cognizant of what you post online is really important because that stuff definitely stays. So if you are a youth that is looking at doing some of these kinds of things, just remember that it will be there for the foreseeable future. It will impact college admissions. It will impact your ability to get a job. We look at that this day in a digital modern age. So.
And after I sent that note, based on my experience to the coach, the social media account was taken down and the comments were taken down. So kids do need some help.
The other important thing is what you're saying with you try and protect yourself, but ultimately you have to be worried about swatting, you have to be worried about security. The other reality is, say you're 14, you have an Instagram account, you have a TikTok account that's really, really popular, and you make a TikTok and your friends are in the background. Your parents might have signed off on you having this, they might be approving your videos, their parents have not. So there's another thing to consider you might be willing to give up your anonymity, but other people did not sign up for that life choice. And if you look at my social media, there's almost no one else in it. You see all the parts of my life, the food I eat, the shows I go to, the fun stuff I'm doing, but it looks like I do it all alone, and I never am. Because there's also an important aspect of respecting other people's privacy there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, again, because I started going online so long ago, and then I was on a TV show which then forced me to use my real name. So for a really long time, I went by a cosplay named Riddle to separate who knew me in cosplay and who knew me in real life, and I did that because early on Facebook, people were reaching out to my parents, and that was really, they're like, who's this person reaching out to me? I'm like, do not add them, so that's when I made a fan page. But early on Facebook, again, cosplay community is really weird, if you had a fan page, you were selling out. You were, so then the cosplay community would attack you for having a fan page. Now it's totally okay.
Right.
But I did that for safety issues. One thing I would always do is I would never post where I was going before I got there. Like if I went to a restaurant, I would only post after the fact.
Right.
Hey, I went to this restaurant, it's fantastic. Early on, I was really careful about saying I was traveling, because if someone knows you're leaving the house and they know where you live, they can break in because you're not there. So I was really careful about that. But to really touch on something you said, I call it long-term branding. And I work now in the movie industry, and I don't talk about my cosplay life, but of course it comes out, and a lot of my coworkers are very cool about it. They'll follow me on Instagram, and we can say, well, companies shouldn't judge us for our hobbies or the color of our hair or the tattoos we have, but they do.
Yes.
So if you are being a bully, or even something as simple like if you're sending sexy photos to somebody or posting sexy photos when you're younger, that will come back. If you say then when you're in your 40s want to work in an accounting firm, and you're like, I don't want to do this, sexy stuff anymore, you have to think of your long-term branding. One example was it's the weirdest thing. I was working on a film and the supervisor was like, hey, don't, and she told the whole crew, the whole costume crew, she's like, don't tell the designer that Ricky's a cosplayer because she will fire Ricky. Just because she's a cosplayer. And that's a weird exception, but there have been times I've had to explain, like I came into work one time and I had taken a sexy selfie at a con, and my boss, who was totally cool, was like, so what's up with that like giant padded bra you were wearing? And I was like, oh, it's what I have to do for the con, take a sexy selfie. He's like, that's fine. He was just like busting my chops, but obviously you never know who's watching, how it's going to affect you later on. And I don't think kids now, they don't, I remember when the internet first started, I can't believe I'm saying that, but they were like,
I do too.
it's like you realize once it's on there forever. And I know, like I tell my nieces and my nephews that, I tell my cousins, but I don't think they really grasp it. They're like in that Snapchat world. They're like, oh, it's only there for 24 hours and then it's the next headline. And I'm like, yes, but you can still go back and dig up that stuff. It might not be relevant or up on the top, but if you dig enough, you can find all that information.
Yeah, and one of the grooming techniques that some of the sexual predators use in gaming and other types of technology is they start befriending someone in a game or in a chat or on social media and start sending DMs or whatever it may be, and then through the grooming process they make it so that the child is comfortable starting to take their clothes off, and it seems that for kids it normalizes the behavior. If they see one of their peers doing it, then they all might do it, which happens. So one of the things I talk about when I go to schools is that when I talk to kids is that they need to keep their clothes on.
Well, I mean, ultimately the hard rule should be, if you're uncomfortable showing it to your mom and your dad, you probably shouldn't be doing it. Whether it's taking your clothes off, a racist comment, a threat. If you are not being like, hey, I posted this, is this cool? Then you shouldn't be doing it. I mean, that to me is like the basis guideline. And unfortunately, there were things I had done early on that I was like, you know what, I wouldn't have shown that to my mom, and now I wish someone had told me that when I was younger.
Meanwhile, I actually do have some sexy bikini photos that I did show my mother very proudly.
There you go. Yeah. So in the right context, it's all perfect,
Yeah, if
right?
you're proud
do
of
that.
it,
Yeah.
I mean, that's one thing, but if someone's
Basically like goading you into doing something you're not comfortable with, then that's the issue.
Yep. All right, so I have another question for you. Sorry about that. How have you seen event organizers or game publishers or anyone else in the industry that kind of runs things respond to these types of threats? Or if maybe you haven't seen any, I don't know. But we're here talking about this, so that's a good
that's
right?
so
that's one.
The biggest thing I've seen, at least in the cosplay community, is there's a big movement called Cosplay's Not Consent.
Yep.
And unfortunately, in all honesty, I have very mixed feelings about this, because one time I was asked to be on the panel, and we're in a panel, tons of people. And I asked the room, I was like, who is okay with touching somebody without permission? And no one put up their hand. The problem is the people who are doing these things are not going to come to the panels.
That's right.
They're not going to look at a sign and be like, oh yeah, my bad, I shouldn't be doing that. The only thing you can do is we have this thing, Marvel, when we work on the Marvel things, if you see something, say something. And that is the best thing you can do, because a lot of times these people don't realize what they're doing is wrong. So someone needs to stand up, say, you almost need to I feel like shame them or guilt them or humiliate them, because that's probably the only thing that's going to affect them. So that's why, I mean, I appreciate the Cosplay's Not Consent and people drawing awareness to it, but it really needs to be see something, say something, because those people are not going to look at a sign and be like, yeah, I shouldn't touch anybody without permission. People are just going to do it.
Right.
So I have something that's a little different. There is this beloved tournament organizer called Beyond the Summit that does all of these wonderful, casual, they cast out of a house, and so the pro players come and sit down on the couch and cast with them, and they do all this really fun, unique content, and they are beloved by the community. They had an event over the summer that invited certain personalities that, again, have a very specific personality. Toxic, inappropriate, ridiculous, misogynistic, you name it, that's what they are. And people acknowledge that. No one is going to fight you that that's what they are. But I couldn't watch that summit. I was so excited for it, and I couldn't watch it because it was so unset, and I didn't know why. And I kept asking more people. The whole community looks forward to these events. This is everyone's favorite. And I kept asking them, oh, did you see that play? Did you see that? And they said, no, I can't watch this. But because it is so beloved, no one could say anything because it would destroy your career.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that and I said, no, I will not stay in this industry where I am because I didn't say something. And so I wrote an article with clips from the stream, like the breast or thighs discussion, that ended with the one guy saying, I respect a woman for her intelligence, big boner friend, and it was this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody who watches it knows that that clip was bad. And it was very controversial. I still get hate for it. I got a lot of hate for it then. I don't care because I got a lot of messages from a lot of people thanking me for saying anything. And the tournament organizer is someone I consider myself good friends with. We talk all the time, and I felt physically ill that I didn't just go to him with my concerns.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't because so many people don't have that connection.
Yeah.
They needed to show it. And this is where a tournament organizer doing something comes in. I didn't want them to apologize because I honestly don't think this is their fault. This was like a player gone rogue kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want the community to hate them. But this man did message me and he said, hey, I don't think the tournament was misogynistic, which I didn't either. I just thought it went too far a few times. He said, I really appreciate the feedback. We're not going to hold it against you. We read through everything, we looked at it. He didn't say this will never happen again, but he also didn't say I was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And they made a public statement that was just like, we're sorry some of you felt this way. The summit's always been a little different. And so it wasn't full support, but it also wasn't full shutdown. And I was personally really, really happy with what happened because for once it felt like Reddit was talking about, it was having rational discourse. People were saying, oh yeah, I understand why this is an issue. And I saw a lot of, I understand why you're offended. I was okay with this, but now seeing it in context, I understand. And it wasn't something anyone was really actively doing. The tournament organizer didn't say, hey, let's have a conversation about this. But they didn't shut it down, and they were supportive of that conversation when it came up. And I thought that was really huge because MOBA esports communities are not the most discussion focused sometimes. And that was really encouraging for me to see someone who's watched the community for 6 years. It was a very maturing moment to think, okay, maybe a year or two from now, a discussion like this will actually start happening in that community rather than
progress.
here.
It's
Yes.
forward progress no matter
Yeah,
how.
exactly.
Yeah.
Small victories.
Yeah, great.
So being involved in the communities directly with the work that I do at the nonprofit, we spend a lot of time and effort working with the developers, the moderators of the chats, as well as the professional players and casual players in the communities, so pretty much all over the board. And having seen both positive and negative experiences for how a company may react, it's from a personal responsibility side, always your duty to speak up. And I appreciate what you've done in your experience with that, being able to speak up, because if nobody champions doing the right thing, then the right thing will never get done. I remember we've had one experience where a community that we had a decent sized presence in, they opted to take one of their streamers who was a rather offensive individual And they were very much promoting his content because his content got views, and that was important to them because they're trying to sell something. So at one point, he opted to create images for the company, and those images contained things like players sitting in trash cans and pretending like they're terrible and they're not worth anything. And the company was all over. They were like, yes, these images look great. Let's put it in our official Discord and make it available to the tens of thousands of people that are there and present. And we pleaded and tried to try and get them to take it down, but at the end of the day, that was a negative experience because they ended up leaving it up. They valued the streamer more than they did the health and the community that they were surrounding themselves with. On a positive side, though, it's also changed in different ways too, because that same company, in a different experience and a different game, they develop multiple games. We were working in the professional esports scene for that game at the time, and the actual top team in the game at the time, representing North America, was extremely toxic. They knew they were better than everybody else, and they were perfectly comfortable showing that, rather than being respectful, playing a good game, even during actual professional matches. And because they were the best team, the company at the time had originally taken the stance of, we're going to let them do their thing, we're not going to push too much. But during the qualifiers for one of the major tournaments that they were destined to win, supposedly, they ended up getting disqualified because it was reported to the developer that they were being offensive or representatives of the community, and they validated it and decided that it was more positive to take that punitive action against them and show people that it's important to take a stand than it was to let it continue on for another year.
Good.
Being from Orlando and Florida specifically, we had a pretty terrible situation happen about 2 years ago. Where in Jacksonville, in the Good Luck Have Fun game bar, there was a Madden tournament, and a player was playing, and he lost the game, and he left the venue, went out to his car, and he grabbed a gun, and he went back in and he murdered multiple individuals. It was a really, really sad and shocking event that happened in the entire gaming world, because it was, these players, are there to play a game and have a good time, and somebody, a terrible thing like that happened. And I definitely saw a shift from adding more security to events and different events in Counter-Strike specifically, more offensive actions and extra police being on site, and I've seen that.
So we have that here, right? We have airport level security here
Yeah,
to make sure
pretty
that
much.
everyone here can enjoy themselves and be safe. So
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you have to do that, right, to be successful.
Unfortunately.
So we're running a little bit out of time, but I did want to give you all an opportunity for the last question. Is there something that, make it a minute or so, that you want to do a little self-promotion about yourself, about what you have coming up next that you want people to know about, or something to get involved with? So.
I work for ESEA. We're directly involved in Counter-Strike Global Offensive. We host a place for players and a community to play and compete in our league and pubs as well. They can compete for prizes, and they can go from being an amateur in the game to become a professional. And that's pretty much
Great.
it.
So again, I'm with NonToxic Gamers, so a non-profit organization which is an advocate against cyberbullying, as well as promoting a positive influence in the gaming community, trying to promote family-friendly content, as well as just influencing kids to be the best that they can be without having to deal with some of the toxicity that exists today.
Thanks.
I have a lot of different projects, but one of my current favorite ones is a podcast I do with other esports industry professionals that the goal of it is to help people understand the economics of esports, the realities that players are facing, the unfair contracts, and talk through the business, all the developer issues like what Blizzard did and what Riot does. That's really nitty-gritty esports with, top journalists and economics people, and it's called the Rivalry Cooldown. It is not family friendly, full disclosure, but I found it to be, it's very intellectual, it's very interesting, it's fast, and the people I get to work with on that are fascinating. And I love, hearing from people who've been doing it for several decades really talk about gaming and as a business and everything that goes into it that the casual consumer doesn't always think about. I'm going to plug my podcast.
Thanks.
Wow, this is a tough act to follow. I don't really have anything going on. I'm just working and making costumes, but I think a lot of this just begins with kindness, and just be kind to just as people, but animals, and I think it'll really change like the way you look at things.
Great, thank you. So for all of you that are out there on the live stream or maybe listening later, if you have kids that are getting into gaming or that you want to get into gaming, so savvycyberkids.org, you can go to the website and download the Digital Parents Guide to Gaming and the Digital Parents Guide to Esports, so you can help guide your kids in the right direction so they can thrive when they go online and know how to respond when predators or scams or other adverse threats are kind of headed their way. We also do a children's book series that we put out. It's on Amazon. There's 3 books in the series. It's called The Savvy Cyber Kids at Home. The second book in the series. Now, this series is for kids 3 to 7 years old. So parents, or aunts, uncles, you need to read the book to your kids that you're involved with. But the second book in the series, the 2 kids are actually playing an online game and they're being cyberbullied. So that second book teaches kids at a very young age about how to respond when you're in game. So this has been a great session. Thank you all to the panel members for joining us, and thank you all for listening in to the live stream and for coming here to the audience. The most important thing that we can do is, be kind, as you said, to everyone and everything. And now that we've started this conversation, continue this conversation in our spheres of influence that we each have, so we can all make a difference. So thank you all so much, and have a great day.